Good morning, Hacksters. We have with us today Mirabelle Jones, who is an amazing multidisciplinary artist. How would you describe what you do?
Well, it depends which capacity. I do a lot of things, as I think most people do, but at Meow Wolf, I'm a designer developer, and my specialty is computer vision and sensors. So I'm also known as the tech witch. So I'm also into witchcraft with technology. Because as we know, technology is magic. In other capacities in my life, I'm a performance artist and a book artist. And so that's weird as well. And then I also run the org Art Against Assault, which is an organization of artists who create art about their experiences with sexual assault, domestic violence in order to raise funds for national and local resources. So I have a lot that I do that's kind of different.
So you mentioned being a book artist, and one of my favorite pieces that you've done is this book that senses your heartbeat and responds to it. Could you talk a little bit about how that one works?
So it's called Assistally, and it's a book that I developed actually a few years ago. I just finished it up last year. And basically it was the impetus for the book came from my cousin Kimmy, who's about my age, who died of a heart attack.
Oh, wow.
My response to this was to research the hell out of heart rate and you know, diseases of the heart. And I found that actually heart disease is the #1 cause of death in the United States. And it's not something we really think about a lot. I think we've started to think about it a bit more in the way that people have, like, you know, wristbands that supposedly tell them their heart rate and that sort of thing. But as far as considering, you know, heart health and really taking it seriously, I don't think that we do that. So Systole is a flat line, and what the book does, there's 2 parts to the book. One is a 3D printed book, and it has different waveforms for different types of heart attacks, and also for a sinus rhythm, which is your normal heart waveform. And underneath each of these 3D printed like slices that go around a cylindrical spine, there's a photocell, so it captures the light when you turn the page and can tell, the page has been turned, and then it'll play a sound sample that matches that frequency of the waveform in question. So there's that part, and then there's also another part to it which uses the Connect and a program that I built off of some research that was done at MIT, and also off of some sort of starter code that was developed by Dwight Bowens of Microsoft. And it basically looks at the subtle changes in the RGB values of your face, and also subtle motion changes, and uses the IR sensor. So it uses those 3 approaches to kind of deconstruct a high-res image of your face and then sense these subtle changes in color value to determine your pulse. So that is another component, and then that turns, there's also a program that turns that into sound. So it's a duet between you and the book. And sorry, that's a long explanation, but it's pretty complicated.
No, that's awesome. I'd been really curious about what you were using for that, and also I wasn't familiar with the purpose behind it, which is kind of amazing. So I guess if you like notice that the sound of your heart and the book is lining up, you should probably just go see a doctor.
Well, I mean, a lot of people ask me that. They're like, aren't you worried that people will experience this book and, you know, get into a state of panic? And my response is no, because in most cases, like, you will know if you're having a heart attack. Not always, but you know, if you feel a pressure in your chest and you feel like a very rough palpitation, that's a heart attack. But our heart rate does change between resting and working out, obviously. And some people just have a regularly like high heart rate, and some people have arrhythmias that are kind of, you know, more or less normal for them. So it's you know, it's not meant to diagnose anything. It's more just to get people thinking about their heart and considering stress as it relates to the body, which is like a real big impetus for me in creating works that involve biofeedback.
Wow, cool. So in your day-to-day, was that one of the things that you sort of parlayed into this work at Meow Wolf, or what do you get up to?
Yeah, a little bit. I'm from California, and I came to New Mexico to learn how to build airships. I have an interest in like off-grid living. I do a lot out at East Jesus, which is like a small arts commune in slab city.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm very interested in ways to, build your own dwellings, use our resources rather than relying on artificially generated resources. So I went out there, and then I worked on a Sicily, again, this like high-tech heart rate reading book that involves a lot of like 3D printing and soldering out in a ship, because I make awkward decisions sometimes. So I'm like soldering in a ship. And my friend Anouk, who makes robotic dresses, her and I were collaborating on a piece at the time, and she got in touch with the director of the tech team, and we became friends, and they sort of abducted me. I wasn't really like planning to stay in New Mexico, but called the land of entrapment for a reason.
Cool. Well, hopefully you enjoy it.
Yeah, it's really great. It's exciting to be a part of a group that's like this, just because a lot of places aren't. Like, I feel like there's so many places that are designed to.
So not everyone watching this will necessarily know what Meow Wolf is. Could you give us like the quick overview?
So Meow Wolf is an immersive arts organization, and I think that term gets thrown around a lot, so I'm going to break it down in terms of what we do. Meow Wolf started with a group of about 10 people who were all friends, and they really just wanted something to do in Santa Fe. Santa Fe is not like the most, happening area for teenagers. And so they started a warehouse, and they just like would create these shows and elaborate installations in tiny worlds. And they just loved doing it, and it kind of caught on, and they started doing it in other cities and doing pop-ups and stuff like that. And then a few years ago, they opened the House of Eternal Return, and that, I don't want to say too much about that because I don't want to give it away in case people are coming to visit.
But that's what people mostly kind of think of when they hear Meow Wolf, right?
Yeah, because that's the venue we have open right now. But it's a house, kind of. It's a multi-dimensional house, and each room is sort of its own installation. And a lot of artists came together to make it. Actually, about 300 people work for us now. I think about 100 worked on the house, and many of the same people are still here. But yeah, it's sort of about world creation and immersion, and people have a hard time like pinpointing what that is. I think in Google we're still listed as a psychedelic haunted house. But it's installation in the way that we don't often see, where we want people to really touch and interact with things, and the worlds really come alive through that interactivity. So my specialty is interactive design here, and a lot of that is just thinking like, how do we make these worlds create a dialogue between the people who are immersing themselves in the worlds, and also the worlds responding to that and growing and changing.
And you're actually giving a talk about the capacitive touch work that you do tomorrow?
Yeah, so we just started Meow Wolf Live, and it's a really cool program. It allows the world to get to know the people behind Meow Wolf a little better, because we're kind of mysterious. Like, you go to our website and you're like, what is this? Very little information. But a lot of really talented people work for us, and not all of the skills that they have get shown in their work just because that's the nature of the beast, but a lot of them do. So I'm doing a CapTouch presentation, which is basically just showing the magic of CapTouch, some different objects, and how to make them work with this board called the Very Conductive board that I love, because it's it's so easy to use. And I don't come from a computer science background. I come from a fine art and literature and writing background, and I sort of came to tech as a way to expand storytelling using modern approaches, because I think that's where we got to go if we're going to keep storytelling and keep the process of reading going. So it's very important for me to create text that's accessible and that really draws in people that may have been not particularly encouraged to pursue interest in tech, because that field is so strongly dominated by white men in particular. So just getting like women, girls, queer folk, people of color, giving them an outlet for learning new technology that doesn't necessitate that background.
That's super cool. So how did you personally pick up your skills?
I picked up my skills sort of like with a lot of resistance, which is why I am so interested in creating avenues for people to learn. The first book I created that involved tech was called Book Reads You, and it was for my thesis at Mills College. And it's a ginormous acrylic book that's illuminated, an illuminated manuscript. I love puns.
Okay.
And
I get it.
yeah. And it uses the Connect, and it basically creates a gesture library. And this is very early on. This is way before the new Connect, which kind of like does that for you in its SDK. But this is basically recognizing the ratio between joints and deciding that that was a gesture. So creating that sort of dictionary, physical dictionary, and then turning that into creative language. So as people move around, it reads their gestures. And I mostly did that because I had a MFA in book art and creative writing, and I also get tired doing this all the time. As a writer. I was like, what if it would be interesting if you could write using your body? But you know, before I did that book, I knew very little as far as like code that would be useful for creating that. And I like went into Noisebridge and was like, I'm gonna learn how to do this, and people were like, you should give up. I was like,
what, really?
Yeah.
Noisebridge.
Yeah, I know. I may have just caught some dudes on a bad day. Like I know a lot of the Noisebridge people, and they've been encouraging in other ways, but it was really a blow. And so I kind of went back and, you know, banged my head against the keyboard, which is what you're told to do as a programmer, which I think is dumb. Like no other pursuit that exists will somebody be like, just go in a dark room and learn it. But for some reason, coding, that's what people tell folk. So yeah, so that's kind of how I got into writing my own programs.
So you mentioned the magic of capacitive touch, and a big part of Meow Wolf's mystique and effectiveness is that it really takes a lot of technology, like really technological bones, as it were, and like turns them into this thing that you don't even really see the tech. Like if you're familiar, you can kind of tell what's going on, but like, you know, how, without obviously compromising you, what kinds of techniques do you use to turn technology into something that's kind of indistinguishable from magic?
Well, I think one thing that I'm very interested as someone with a visual art background, and a lot of that is things like books or other sculptures that involve reading. Like they don't necessarily look like books. I do know traditional bookmaking, but for me, I'm interested in creating objects that you read that have a story embedded, and that you know, physically interact with to tell what story it is. So part of the magic is hiding the sensors, is making the experience seamless so that people aren't aware of what's going on. And I think that's something that's often overlooked in maker culture, because we are so interested in the tech that we want it to just be there. So we don't really like encapsulate it entirely in objects, or if we do, they're in these objects that are very techie objects, right? That are, you know, robots, etc.
Like take an old Commodore 64 and turn it into like a runaround robot, or like
exactly, yeah, where it's like, here's some tech in a tech. And I'm not dissing that because I think
dog. I heard you like
technology. I want and wonderful. I love it. But yeah, a lot of Meow Wolf stuff is like, what is interactive, right? When people come to visit.
Because I said you're a dog, isn't it?
Yeah, so a lot of like what I do is figure out like, okay, here's an object that we want to make, or part of an installation, and you know, how do we make that interactive in a way that matters? So like also a big thing about tech is just putting, you know, tech in something for the sake of putting it in there. Like, why does this thing light up? Why does it make sound? So yeah, it's creating some kind of logic for that is a big part of what I do. As well as like, you know, making that seamless experience where it's not just, you know, on off, but maybe you're creating something that's a bit more about how people feel and how people are uncovering some mystery.
Right. Yeah, you're not necessarily focusing on the pieces parts, and more on like how you're so excited and like you want to figure out this thing, because like there's a lot of sort of investigation that happens, like the story.
There's a lot of R&D too, where it's like, here is a sensor, let me figure out if I like it or not, and if it's gonna do the thing I want it to do. And there's a lot of like fudging that goes on in, in like on the back end in programming land to get them to do what I want them to do. There's often like, when you are drawing attention to tech, there's a lot of investment in people in not understanding things and being fine. So I also like using the idea of like high tech that goes low or low tech that goes high and gives the impression of something really techy. So yeah,
that's really cool.
Yeah.
So a second ago, you said that the approach at the time you were learning was sort of like go in a dark room and learn to program.
Bang your head against the keyboard, yeah.
Yeah, and it sounds like one of the things that's happened to help ameliorate that is that they've included better tools for creating your own gestures in the SDK.
It's true, yeah.
Yeah, what else do you think would help, or what exists now that we didn't have before that helps, or what would help you if you were learning again in the future?
I think, I mean, really having the encouragement in the platform is first and foremost. I did have a background in web development, a pretty heavy background in web development before launching into that world. But I think definitely having an atmosphere where people can just learn and try things out is really important. Aside from that, it is useful to have things like the Connect SDK where you can play around with the effects prior to actually going into Codeland and developing anything, and then sort of tweaking other people's stuff. The Arduino Forum, and like, I think she's eating my hair. The Arduino Forum and GitHub are great resources. I really love like kits, starter kits, you know, things that where there's like a low barrier for learning things. Like the ReSpeaker, I think, is a really cool microcontroller that has like a 7 mic array on it and some preloaded CapTouch capabilities. So stuff like that, I think really just getting people interested in what can I do, because so many people look at a microcontroller and they're like, you know, or they look at a soldering iron and they freak out. And, you know, rightfully so in a lot of ways. We're not often taught about these things in school. You have to really like have an interest and develop those skills.
Yeah, and you mentioned the bare conductive touchboard earlier, which I used for the first time recently, and it's so easy.
It's
it is
really cool.
Laughably easy. You just drop the keys onto an SD card, you program it in Arduino, or don't even modify the example sketch, which is already working.
It's so easy, and you can use, you know, you can use all kinds of stuff with it. You can just connect some alligator clips. You don't really have to like solder anything, but you can if you want to, which is awesome.
The thing with options.
Yeah, you can use soft textiles, right? Like you can use conductive thread, you can use paint. I think that board is just great because I think the parts that really scare people are like code, first and foremost, scary. And then soldering and things like powering, that's all kind of scary to people. So anything that eliminates that, and also, you know, has like a real like quick turnaround, where it's not like, okay, I'm going to spend 2 hours on this thing and maybe I'll get really frustrated, versus like, I'm going to put some sound files on the SD card and then hook up, you know, like something with this alligator clip.
Yeah, and you have this really quick, like you said, turnaround time.
Yeah.
And plus they have these template like capacitive sensors for use in proximity and whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
So you don't even have to design your own sensors. They have an audio out, so you don't have to worry about amplifiers.
Yeah, things like, you know, like the Grove sensors or Gravity. I think those are great too. I use those all the time with artists who are really interested in learning. But again, like are super scared about microcontrollers. Yeah, those are really cool. And it's just nice to have that as an option to just be like plug and play. Yeah, those are great too.
You said Gravity?
Yeah, Gravity sensors. It's another kind of, I can send you the link for it.
Yeah, so all the things that we're talking about, by the way, folks, we will put in as links in the description to this video so you can check it all out afterwards. So cool.
Puppy.
Like,
puppy.
The rest of my questions are mostly about Violet, but I'll save that for another time.
Yeah, I think you should have puppies in all interviews, really.
I know, it's the best interview ever. It's so good. Is there anything that you would like to throw out there as something that you think people who are interested in Meow Wolf, who are interested in creative technology, I love that you say like de-emphasize the technology for one thing.
I think one thing I want to throw out for sure is that we do have a few locations that are opening. So we have a immersive art ride, a dark ride that's opening in Elledge Gardens. That's going to open in April, so that's really soon. And that's exciting to me because I always wanted to make like a weird art psychedelic ride.
What kind of Willy Wonka?
I wish. So there's that, and then we're working on Denver and in Las Vegas. We have 2 locations that are opening there. And then we also just announced Washington, D.C. and a hotel that we're doing in Phoenix. So there's a lot, and hopefully people, you know, will learn more about what we do and not necessarily have to come all the way to Santa Fe to see it.
Yeah,
so
cool.
You should come to Santa Fe to see it too.
Oh, yeah. First one. I came through and it was freaking amazing. It's interesting that they say about haunted house, which it doesn't feel scary at all. And I'm a huge wuss. Like, let's just put that out there. I'm no good with like scary stuff. I don't watch horror movies or whatever. But I loved it because it's not about like being scared. It's about like an aura of mystery. And
I think it's like people have really interesting reactions to it. I started a channel on Slack here called Overheard at Meow Wolf. It's mostly for our docents who have kind of seen everything that there is to see, but it shares like some of the things that have come out of people's mouths at Meow Wolf, and people kind of like waver between having pretty on par reactions where they're like, oh, this is so sick and weird and this is just like the world I want to live in, to people who are like, what is going on? Where am I? I think my favorite one was, honey, we gotta go, grandma's having flashbacks.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
So where can people find out more of your personal work?
So I have a portfolio under mirabellejones.com, and Mirabelle is Mirabelle, Jones like Jones, and that has sort of all of my like performance art, book art, installation art stuff. And then unfortunately you're gonna have to wait until Denver and Vegas, etc. opens to see some of my other handiwork, and unfortunately I can't talk about it.
Oh yeah. But totally understand.
But it's gonna be great.
I cannot wait to see. This is so cool. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cheers. All right, I'll talk to you soon, and we'll put again all the links in the description of this video. Have an awesome day, Mirabelle. Everyone.
Okay, you too.
Cheers.
Bye.